Should have done that sooner. Sorry.
No problem. All right, so I'm just going to read a little bit from the first chapter. My book, Mona at Sea, is set in 2009. And in this chapter, we find our intrepid heroine at a job networking seminar for the unemployed, and she really does not want to be there in the slightest. And just double checking, yes, this is what I'm reading. Okay. Folding chairs are arranged in a semicircle, and I grab the one closest to the door. As I'm chewing on a cuticle and trying to divine shapes in the brown grain of the carpet, a guy about my age sits next to me, and in between guttural attempts to clear his throat, I hear a wet clicking sound that I identify as a tongue ring being rapped against teeth. Cringing at each thwack, I slouch lower in my seat, hoping he'll take the hint. He doesn't. Hey, he says. I ignore him, so he tries again. Hey, and he jabs an elbow into my arm. Do I know you? He asks. I look at him without blinking, but undaunted, he tries again. Did you go to Marana, class of '02? No, I say, I didn't go to Marana. Do you know Pokey, Worm's little brother? Did you used to party over at their place? Or the Pita Pit? Did you used to work at the Pita Pit? I sit up straight and face him, too undercaffeinated and overstressed to continue this line of questioning. I don't know you, I say. I don't know Pokey or Worm or the place where they used to party. But he only shakes his head and sits back in his chair, pulling out his phone. Nah, dude, he says, I know you. I'm gonna figure it out. Don't worry. Mercifully, the door opens and an older woman with orange, fluffy hair and red paisley pants strides in and asks us to sit down. My seat companion pockets his phone and I resume chewing my cuticle, praying we won't have to give introductions. Welcome, job seekers, says the woman with a smile. My name is Paulette. Before we get started this morning, I want to give you one piece of advice. She reaches for a binder under her chair and removes a piece of paper, the word breathe written across it in black marker. She holds it forth like the 11th commandment and nods while we take in the power of her message. I want to tell you, I know where you're coming from, she says. I was a legal secretary for 17 years and got laid off after a merger. I searched high and low for another job, but at my age, and here she points to her head so we can all see her gray roots and know she's deliberately chosen carrot-colored hair. At my age, it's hard to convince employers to take a chance on you. So I started coming to church, and here I tune out for a while. I told my mom this meeting was a thin ruse to pack the pews on Sunday, but she wouldn't listen. And Jesus led me here, and I've been running these workshops for the last 3 years. Paulette finishes her spiel with a quick glance heavenward and says, now, let's get to know one another, shall we? The other job seekers stand one by one, give their name and sad situation, laid off, downsized, restructured, redundant. The day I started my senior year at the University of Arizona, France's largest bank halted withdrawals from 3 of its biggest funds, citing fears about a looming subprime mortgage crisis, effectively setting the stage for the Great Recession. How's that for a bad omen? As my turn to speak approaches, I consider running, but I only have 2 dimes in my purse. Where would I go? Tongue Ring is next. He's wearing white Pumas and the kind of denim pants that inhabit the strange, unnamed sartorial category between shorts and capris. His goatee tapers into a thin line that connects with his sideburns, and though he's dressed in athletic apparel, he looks no stranger to the Taco Bell drive-thru. What's up? He says. I'm Jason. I work at Safeway. I used to do sheet metal fabrication, but I got fired. Here he pantomimes smoking a joint. I like working on cars, and I guess I'm a people person. He looks at me and winks, and I'm so appalled I can't even roll my eyes. I shouldn't be here. This feels too much like accepting defeat. I can't shake the image that somewhere in lower Manhattan, there's a building full of desks, and on one of those desks is a little brass and falsewood nameplate that says Mona Morellis. It's my turn. I rise and face the room. Besides Chasen, I'm the youngest by at least 20 years. And looking down at my flip-flops and the Princess Jasmine t-shirt I slept in, I think the age difference is apparent to everyone else in the room too. My name is Mona Morellis. I say 8 months ago, I graduated from U of A with a major in finance. I got recruited out of college to work in an investment bank in New York, but that kind of fell through. So here I am. My heart is clanging so hard, I can see it rising and falling under the swoop of Princess Jasmine's bubble braid. Since September, I've spoken only to my parents, my brother, and my best friend, Ashley. Even the guy at the liquor store and I have worked out a system of grunts and head jerks. 30 unblinking eyes are making me bury my fingernails sharp into my palms as sweat trails down my sides. I can see the panic attack like it was a freight train, and me, my feet wedged between the rails. I suck in a breath and hold before letting it out slowly, trying not to look like I'm practicing Lamaze. Which bank? Paulette asks. My face reddens. Bannerman, I say, addressing the floor. There's a murmur. One woman whistles and lets out a low shit. Paulette tisks, and I can practically hear her face fall in pity. Truly, my story is the saddest of them all. Thank you so much.
Don't we all feel that? Our story is the saddest of them all. Before we just jump into Madhav, I want to ask you how you found her voice, because it just comes through so clearly in the book. I can feel every bit of who she is, and I wonder when you started hearing her.
Yeah, her voice came pretty naturally, probably frighteningly naturally. I think about, like, you know, in cartoons where you have the angel and the devil on your shoulder. I think she might be like my devil voice. I just started writing the character, and her voice was completely what announced itself. And of course, like, I revised, you know, and worked on it. But yeah, I knew that she was an entitled, acerbic, deeply troubled person, and that's just what came out.
But it was so lovely for me, and perhaps for other people on this call, to get inside the skin of a millennial, and not, you tend to, at my age, just read the same books with the same voices, and I just had such compassion for her. Probably you've helped a whole generation of people by giving her voice. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we have Madhav join the conversation with reading, and then we'll have a bigger conversation? Or is there?
No, we can wait until we have the Q&A.
Okay, so you ready, Madhav?
Yes, I am ready, and that was wonderful, Elizabeth. What an excellent novel you've written.
Thank you.
I really couldn't put it down. It is highly recommended. And
Yeah.
what really surprised me is how many times I laughed during it. I don't know if I was meant to laugh, but there's some very, very funny moments, and hopefully I laughed at the appropriate times.
I'm sure you did. Thank you so much.
So for a few minutes, we're going to travel from America in 2009, and we're going to 1977 and Tehran, Iran, another point in time where everything is about to change, another historic moment. And we're going to join our 28-year-old protagonist, Ayan Pathak, as he's escorting his mother, who's visiting from India, on a tour of the famous Tehran Bazaar. And it's just about a week after the Ayatollah Khomeini's son has died under mysterious circumstances in Najaf, Iraq, where Khomeini, the Ayatollah, is exiled. And the general sentiment is that he was murdered by the Shah's secret police, certainly in the bazaar, which is a very religiously conservative place. So we start where Ayan's mother has gone on a tour of the architectural tour of the famous Shah Mosque, which is inside the bazaar. And Ayan's driver, Hamid, who's acting as their guide, has gone into the mosque for the afternoon prayer. And Ayan suddenly finds himself alone. So I'm going to read a few pages from that point on. Ayan meandered into the courtyard of the mosque. A few stragglers were walking towards the prayer hall. Why not join them? It would help to pass the time. He blended into the group, which was a good thing, he felt, in this time of inflamed feelings. An odor of overused shoes and sweat, familiar from temples in India, came at him as he entered the crowded prayer hall after the ritual cleansing of the face, head, forearms, and the top of the feet. Ayan made his way to a nook in the wall and scanned the bright hues of the geometric patterns on the dome of the mosque. Rays of light and spirit and wisdom seemed to fan out over a growing sea of worshippers, standing, bowing, kneeling, prostrating. But instead of the contemplative calm and humility, Ayan sensed a collective rage. The anger in the mosque gathered strength as the minutes rolled by, racing from body to body, ricocheting off the walls and columns, rushing out onto the twin minarets, sending a complaint to the heavens above. The mood took Ayan back to that dreadful moment on Pahlavi a few days ago. The shouts of the protesters, the boy's head split open by Savak, uncaring tires running through the stream of innocent blood. Finally, the crowd dispersed into the courtyard. But Hamid and a small group of men remained behind, clustered around their imam. The tall, wiry man, Hamid's friend, began speaking. "We have to avenge Mustafa's death," he said. "We must let these Savak criminals know they have gone too far. Allahu Akbar." "Allahu Akbar," the group responded. The imam quietened the group and looked around. Ayan stepped back into the nook. "We must be wise and patient," the imam said in a low voice. "Our path is righteous, alhamdulillah. Ayatollah Khomeini in his greatness has called the loss of his son a hidden favor of God, an altaf kafiyah. He has asked us to show fortitude and hope. That is the right way." The imam paused to look into the eyes of each man. Then he spoke with a new urgency. "It is approaching the 40th day since the steadfast scholar of Qawm, Haji Agha Sayyid Mustafa Khomeini, beloved morning star of our resistance, was martyred in the holy city of Najaf by Savak and that dog Saddam. You have shown your loyalty and bravery by demonstrating against this injustice. That is not enough. The future depends on you. My children, you must go out and get more people to join us. Our numbers have to become irresistible. Spread the word that we will hold a special gathering on Friday, December 2nd, to mourn Mustafa. We are in the hundreds now. Inshallah, we will be in the thousands soon. Then in the millions. These infidels are drunk with corruption and power. But each time they martyr a true believer, each 40th day of mourning, the flood will gather strength. It will become a wave of righteousness, cresting ever higher and drown the illegitimate evil Pahlavi regime and their backers, the Americans and the Israelis. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, truly you do not call on one deaf or absent, but truly to one who hears and sees, and he is with you. The imam punched both hands into the air, index fingers raised, and wheeled away dramatically. His followers stared at the door that had closed behind him. Hamid's friend raised a fist and called out, "Allahu Akbar." "Allahu Akbar," the others roared back at him. Hamid stood on his toes, his clenched hand pounding the air. "Marg Bar Shah," the tall, wiry man yelled, the veins in his neck bulging. "Marg Bar Shah, Mar Bag Amrika," the group responded, driven to a frenzy. Ayan slipped back into the courtyard and watched as the group walked out of the mosque a few minutes later. their chests puffed out with the momentary confidence of insignificant men made great by some common cause. So I'll stop the reading there and just tell you for a few minutes, talk to you for a few minutes about why I wanted to write this story. I really wanted to give a voice to my generation that came of age in the early 70s, Indians who were far away enough from independence and the brutal partition of India, where they were, for the first time, we were able to think broadly about the world and about a life without boundaries, an imagined life. And as I set out and left India and traveled, I found it was not just Indians, but a whole cohort of people that I began to call the global nation-speaking state, English-speaking state of mind, who were driven by an idea of America rather than of metropolitan Britain. And it could be an idea of America driven by Kerouac or Joplin and Dylan or Bobby Kennedy. Or it could be an idea of America based on the echoes of the Vietnam War protests that had died down in America but were reverberating around the world. And so I was part of this cohort, which was being buffeted by two revolutions. One, the social and cultural revolution of the 70s, which brought in all these freedoms. And then the leftist revolutions that were being spurred on by the Sorbonne and by the independence movement in Algeria, by Sartre and Fanon. And so you had parts of this cohort, global cohort, that were either following traditional dreams, but trying to live without boundaries, or at the other end, people who really wanted to upend things and change the world in their countries. So I really wanted to tell this story, and as my corporate career progressed, there was this sort of ebb and flow, give and pull, all the compromises of corporate life that started echoing in my mind. And then suddenly this experience of arriving in Iran, not expecting the Sybaritic lifestyle that I found there. You know, Iran, when I reached there, Tehran was like the great cities of the world, like Havana, Cuba, like Beirut, like Hong Kong and Rio. These were the fabled cities, the watering holes of the world. And then, and I didn't expect that, neither did I expect 2 years later to be scrambling, looking for a way out to get out of this revolution that was unfolding around me. So I wanted to write about that. And finally, I wanted to write about stories that I'd heard through the oral tradition of our family, stories that were receding into the fog of memory. And I wanted to write about them before people in my family, relatives and influences passed on. And so I found a way, as I attended, and thank God I did this, various conferences, workshops at Stanford, where through input from a very diverse group of people, by age, by nationality, by education, their feedback helped shape this really into a novel, and into a novel that distanced itself from my own personal experience. And you know, it's a cliche to say it became a novel about Ayan and Gabby and Hamid and Hosseini. And I think I'll stop there. I think that provides, and I'll turn it back to you, Karen.
Well, Elizabeth, maybe you could add, you've explained why you set your novel where you did, the time, the place. I'm curious, Mona, what drew you to the economic crisis of 2008?
Yeah, well, similar to Madhav, I have an autobiographical connection to the book. I got an MBA in 2008. I graduated a few months after Lehman Brothers and Countrywide and these other companies collapsed, and I spent all of 2009 trying to find a job. I was looking for an entry-level job in corporate finance. I couldn't get anything. I applied to somewhere between 300 and 400 jobs. I didn't get anything. I couldn't even get a part-time receptionist job. And then I got pregnant, and then I found myself taking care of a baby full time when I thought I was going to like be this career person. And I started writing the book as a way to, in some ways, channel my frustrations about this long experience of unemployment that I had just gone through, and also as a way to kind of maintain my sanity while being a full-time stay-at-home mother. And I think it's really interesting that we both have fictionalized a personal experience. I have a question for Madhav. Did you ever consider writing this as a memoir? And at what point, if so, at what point did it turn into fiction?
Interestingly, I did. I started writing this as a memoir, really more as a family history with a personal story in the middle. And for the first 2 or 3 years, I was writing that, researching and writing that. And it turned in, it was when I started the workshops. And one of the instructors, I think it was Nancy Backer or Lynn Stegner, one of the legendary instructors there, said, you know, this has to be a novel for it to fly. You've got such a big, she said, you know, I don't want to say this about my own book. She says, it's such a big book. There's so much in here, but it has to be a novel for it to take flight. So I think I was moving in that direction, and as a chance of interaction with Deepak Chopra, who some of you might know, and I was chatting to him at a corporate event, and somebody said, oh, look, here's Madhav, and he's writing a novel. So he just out of politeness said, well, what is it about? And at that point, I was trying to figure out, you know, how best to create a real passion, and, you know, why would Ayan really do what he was doing? And a love story had emerged. So I said, it's a love story. And he said, he put his hand on me and he says, Madhav, I'm happy because every good story is a love story. So, you know, and he said it with such conviction. So, so it became really, you know, I started writing in fiction. I started writing it as a love story. And then as the characters, again, this is a lot of cliche, but as they really became different from me, as Ayan did, and he started doing what Ayan would do, and Gabby started doing what Gabby would do, the book started taking off. And, you know, so it was around, I think, 2011, 2012 when it became fictional.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I have tried a few different times to write things based on real events. I have a second novel that I'm pretty much finished with, and it's based on real people. And I had tried to make the novel loosely fictionalize real events, and I just couldn't do it. The story didn't want that to happen. The story wanted to go in all these different places. And I finally, after messing with it for a couple of years, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to change all the names. I'm going to fictionalize everything. I'm going to just make things up, which is what I like doing anyway. I'm a fiction writer. I like making things up. And all of a sudden, the story just came together. And so I completely understand what you're saying, that Gabby wanted to do this and your other characters wanted to do this. It sounds silly if you're not a writer. Like, of course you're the writer, like you're the one telling them to do things, but there is some like weird alchemy that happens when characters get on the page. Sometimes they just you try to make them do this and this, and they're like, no, I'm over here now.
Right, exactly. And it sounds fake if you don't let them do what they should be their personalities or the people they become would normally do.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because both of you seem to be reflecting that you sort of accidentally fell into writing novels. And I love the serendipity of that. It wasn't, unless I'm wrong, did you dream about being a novelist as kids? Did you think you had a novel in you before you faced these circumstances, or was it the circumstances only that led you there?
No, in my case, I wanted an entry-level job in corporate finance.
Lucky for all of us, that didn't turn out.
As every little kid dreams about, that was what I wanted. And no, it just didn't work out that way.
Madhav, you mentioned the romance, and there's a really compelling one in Mona at Sea as well. In both stories, I mean, I fell in love with the lovers and was really rooting for them all the way along. And in both, I hate to, I'm having to get comfortable with spoilers, but I don't want to spoil the novel for anyone who hasn't read it yet. But it could have turned out very differently for all the characters, and I'm wondering how that love story developed, and when you made choices to bring them together instead of pulling them apart. That either one of you, because in both cases there were moments where you thought, this isn't going to work for these guys.
Go for it, Elizabeth.
Yeah, in my case, I did this kind of authorial cheat in the book where I just have my protagonist list out her problems. I believe it is, I'm unemployed. I've never had a boyfriend. I live with my parents in the most boring town in America, Tucson, and I hate myself. And it was great. I didn't start out in the first few drafts doing that, but once I figured that out, I was like, okay, great. Now I have a checklist, and I can actually just have my character tick off these problems and scratch them out, and then we see the story progressing. So one of her problems was that she had never had a boyfriend, and she's 23. Some people make it to 23 and they haven't had a relationship yet. And then I got to have the fun of somebody who is fairly unpleasant to be around and also fairly socially awkward, get into her first relationship and what would that look like. And so it was really fun to write. And she just has so much that she's up against for most of the book that, like, I had to let those two crazy kids work it out in the end. It's not the main thrust of the book, so I don't think it's that big of a spoiler, but in most books, the lovers tend to stay together. Yeah.
Yes. And Madhav, same with you. I was worried about your lovers quite a bit throughout the book.
Well, it's there's a group. In fact, I've got people who send me notes saying they are Team Fariba, and they are angry at me that Ayan did not end up with Fariba. In fact, a few book clubs I've also been part of said, well, they seem so much better suited to each other. Why did he go off after this? After Gabby, who was really not very sure about anything and not really sure about him. And it was just a decision. It just happened. I thought it would have been too easy for Ayan to just, Fariba was there. She was ready to settle down, and everything would have been too easy.
Right. The conflict would have been missing at that point.
And also it reminded, it was too similar to just going back home to India. Because, one of the things people have said is, why didn't he just go back to India rather than get caught in this dilemma? And India at that time had very limited options. It was, you were on a starvation diet if you didn't want to be in the government or in a corporate job. You really had not much of a choice. Things have changed very much now. And you pretty early on settled into an arranged marriage, and that was that. And I think since the character of Ayan rebelled against that, he was trying to live this borderless, he was trying to live the life he had read about in all these books, all these mad romances in The Red and the Black, and in all these other books he'd read about passion. And he wanted to experience that. And he wanted to experience unfettered life from a career standpoint. So I guess that's what Gabby represented, was that kind of person. And then, I suppose I was trying to think about a good model for Gabby, and I'm a big fan of Charlize Theron, and especially in the Mad Max series. And so I was when I was writing about Gabby, I was sort of thinking about Charlize, obviously being one of the early female pilots. And my wife has to stop me from looking at female pilots when I fly, because a lot of them look a lot like how I've described Gabby. A lot of them are quite tall, etc. So it was kind of interesting. I think but back to the question you asked, it was because it was more in keeping, just as Elizabeth said, the character is somewhere else. The character has to be real.
Right.
The character had chosen Fariba, he should have gone back to India and just accepted life. But he wanted to challenge everything. And he wanted to go for everything he wanted.
And both novels put their protagonists at odds with their mother, which is another common universal thread in life. But formidable characters in both stories as well. The disapproving mom that you just can't quite please. And how I imagine, was that coming from some personal memoir experience as well, or is it just doing what we all do, rub up against a mother at some point?
In my case, no, it was not based on any kind of autobiographical thing. In fiction writing, I think like it works really well if you have a character who is one way. The best way I think to draw out who the character is to put them in surround them with people who they're going to be in opposition with, right? So like the classic example is The Odd Couple, I believe, right? Like one character was super tidy, the other one was super messy, and so this like creates instant conflict. And another interesting way to bring this out is to have characters who are very similar, but they don't realize how similar they are. And so that
dynamic,
that can cause them to have friction as well. And so Mona and her mom are incredibly similar in ways that is not apparent to either of them. And so that's why they fight all the time, is because they're just so similar.
In my case, Ayan's mother is modeled very much after my mother. So there are some real characters in this book, which, the parents, the driver, the Sabak's secret policeman, these are all modeled after, real people. So yes, my mother was a force of nature, very similar to that. In a way, the 2 chapters on her was sort of she died fairly young. So it was like just sort of a homage to her and how I imagined she would have developed. But she was quite the matriarch of a large family.
How about our guests tonight, our audience? Anyone have a question or a comment? Anything they'd like to unmute themselves and ask directly, or I can ask for you? Either way, anyone interested? Lee, I saw a couple people adjusting. Yes, Lee, go ahead and unmute yourself if you can. Let's see what happens when I do that. There we go.
No, I had been wondering to ask Madhav what propelled him to go through all that he did and to write the novel. And I think he partially answered that. And it's interesting that I heard a number of things from him, knowing each other for quite some time, that I hadn't heard before. And so, I mean, it has compelled me to pick his brain more. And he did answer, I think, pretty much the question I had of what caused him. By the way, are you thinking of another one? Elizabeth already indicated she's got another one on tap. But Madhav, are you thinking of another one?
You know, I am thinking of another one. You know, and it's I don't want to make it like the Rabbit series, you know.
Sure.
Which it could well become. But I do, what I'm thinking is also in the thriller, using a thriller to explore kind of moral dilemmas and compromises set in, you know, the world that I inhabited, you know, the hedge fund world of Manhattan and Silicon Valley venture capital. And there's so much drama there of insider trading, etc. Elizabeth knows that. There's so much material I have. So I'm waiting to see who the protagonist should be. One of the book clubs I talked at said it has to be Ayan because, you know, he's learnt. Obviously, we want to know what he's learned and how he handles this. But you know, I'll see. I'm mulling it over, Lee.
Good.
And so,
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Evelyn, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, I've unmuted. I have the disadvantage that I haven't yet read Mona at Sea. I've read Labyrinth. I know Madhav for a long time. I'm coming in from New York City also. If I look a little tired, it's because it's later here. But I wanted to ask both of you how you capture the spirit of the places that you've set your characters in. Particularly Madhav, you know, you had to go back in time to places you'd been, but it has been a few decades. And Elizabeth, I'm not sure exactly where yours were set, but of course you had to deal with that. And I'm really interested in that. How you know, did you have to research or did you just do it from memory? That's I always find it interesting how authors can really get you into a different place than, you know. Thanks.
Yeah, I can go first. So my book is set in Tucson, and I'm from Texas. I've never actually lived in Tucson. I've only visited there, and I set the book there for a very strategic reason, which was that my character's parents are both medical researchers, and I needed a place that was hot, that was in the Southwest with a significant Mexican-American population. My character is Mexican-American, as I am, and I needed there also to be a major research university there that would employ two doctors researching Alzheimer's. And unfortunately, the places I grew up in Texas, Laredo and Corpus Christi, that just wasn't, there aren't any research universities there, so it wasn't a good spot. So I chose Tucson. My husband actually went to University of Arizona and he lived there for 9 years. So I could ask him anything, you know, how long would it take to get from West Ina up Campbell to the foothills, you know, whatever. But when I'm writing the descriptions of how hot it is and you get sweat under your bra and your like back of your legs are sticking to the leather seats of your car, I'm writing about Texas. So I'm calling it Tucson, but I'm really writing about Texas. And one other thing that was really interesting to me, I've lived a lot of places in the US. I've lived in New York, Texas, Oakland, California. I've lived in Kansas. I've lived in Alabama, and I've visited almost all 50 states. And it's really weird and unsettling, but most of America looks like everywhere else. You can be in Kansas City, you can be in Pittsburgh, you can be in Fresno. Like a lot of America, you can walk outside, you can't really tell where you are. And I have these long, or not too long, but I have these passages describing the strip malls and the parched soccer fields, etc. And what I was trying to do was also just talk about the sameness of the United States, which it's amazing to me, because I've traveled a little bit in Europe and throughout Mexico as well. And other countries are not like that. Other countries, like the towns look different. And in America, we just have this kind of homogeneity that's, it's fascinating to me. So it was a long answer to that question, but thank you for that.
Interesting though, yeah.
And in terms of yes, Evelyn, it's true. There was a long time ago that I lived in Tehran, but obviously Delhi, not much is set there, but I go there frequently. I worked for two German companies, Siemens and Allianz, and especially Allianz. We used to have our corporate executive gathering in a place I set a scene in the Starnberger at Sea, which is where Gabby's parents live. And so I was very, very familiar with that whole lake and with Munich, and because I would go there 2-3 times a year for these events. And then I was really keen to just stay in Munich, the action, and it so happened that we were on a holiday in Berlin while the book was being written. And my wife said, listen, my friend, if you want, I'm going to go to one place in Germany. I don't have the patience to go research Munich where you want to go back to the places. Let's just do something here. So we spent a couple of days, and I'd been to West Berlin during in 77, 78, Checkpoint Charlie times. I absolutely loved West Berlin. It was such a great city. And so I was familiar with it, and with Charlottenburg and with the British sector. And we just walked into Charlottenburg one day, and we saw this particular street and this particular house. And so that helped to set the stage for Gabby's apartment. But beyond that, Tehran, obviously I had a lot of photographs from my time there. And so the photographs brought back a lot of memories. I looked at a lot of videos. I saw a lot of movies. A lot of Iranian directors are just world class. So Evelyn, all that helped.
Why don't both of you elaborate a little bit more about your process? I mean, both of you have described sort of how the setting came about, but what about just in general, what your day looks like when you're writing a novel?
I started writing this book in 2011, and I was staying at home with my daughter, who was an infant at the time. And I wrote some of the rough draft, like literally with her sleeping on my arm, typing with one hand. And my kids are older now, and it's a lot easier for me to get time to write, but I had to steal little moments back then. And the process of getting it published it took a really long time. I finished it in 2015, and it went around to editors, and nobody ended up picking it up. And I put it in a drawer, and I would submit it to small presses every now and again, not really expecting anything. And then in 2019, I submitted it to this contest, and it was picked up, and I was offered a contract for publication. So it was like a total bonus, but I really gave up on this book. I never expected it to ever come out of a drawer and be in the world. But I've learned a lot over the last 10 years, and I have a writing process now, which is, I try to do it as close to Monday through Friday, like a regular job, as I can get. And we just moved to Massachusetts over the summer, and I've been in the middle of like book launch too. And so everything's been completely upended, but I try to treat it as much like a 9-to-5 normal job as I can. I think that's just how I work best.
Mhm. That's how that second novel will hit the galleys, make it out. And Madhav, what would you like to add to that?
Fascinating, Mona. There's a lot of similarities, Mona. Elizabeth. It's about the third time today I've called you Mona, because I just finished the book, so it's Mona is still in my head. But I started, actually, as I said, it started seriously writing it in 2011 too. And people told me, well, what has taken you so long? Why did it take 10 years? It does take time. I mean, you finished in 2015. I actually was still messing around with it till middle of last year. And, and people were saying, come on, now just get it out already. And a friend of mine from the Stanford Writers Studio, she, a fellow student, she said, Madhav, this book needs to see the light of day. Give it to me. So she had a friend, a pretty world famous journalist who wanted to encourage writers. And, he took me on at her because he liked her basically. And
Whatever works.
Whatever works. And, so we had our back and forth, and, he's got very strong opinions, which most of the fights he won with the one line, am I in the publishing business or are you? He would tell me. So it's fine. So the title, the cover, I must say, all that came from them. But the whole process, actually, when I finished the first draft and I was doing the second, I said, you know what, if this is ever going to get done, I have to sit down for 3 or 4 hours every day. And so that's what I did. Like you, Elizabeth, I started every single day, going down to my study and doing 3 to 5 hours. And it really picked up steam. And then, you read about Hemingway's process. And his thing was, he always said, don't finish writing everything you have in one particular day, leave something in reserve. So you're anxious to get back the next day. And that sort of helped me. And I think that really helped. And I'm hoping, I'm going to be inspired by you, Elizabeth. And my second book hopefully will be done in 2 years or less.
You can do it.
It can happen.
Try.
We are just 1 minute away from 8 o'clock. Does anyone have any final thought or question? It looks like yes. Karun.
Madhav, do you think putting Ayan in New York in the middle of a South Asian insider trading scandal could be a book that would be picked up quite quickly by a publisher?
We could hire Mona.
I would hope so, but I'm slightly worried. See, over here, enough time has gone by since 77, 78, and nobody will remember. People who I don't think people will recognize themselves. Things have changed. There's enough distance so that I could really cheat and steal from characters that I interacted with.
Right.
The trouble is, that's my profession. It was my job, and it was a pretty high. So anyway, everybody.
You knew several of the central characters.
Yeah, I know several of the central characters. So I'm going to have a harder time disguising that.
Yeah. Well, the characters can develop themselves. You have a starting point.
I will probably start with 2 or 3 characters that you would probably know.
Yeah.
And hopefully they will change by, by the end of the first draft.
Yeah. Sounds great. Congratulations to you both.
Yes. Congratulations to you both. I thoroughly enjoyed both novels. If you haven't read them, you know where to get them at your independent bookstore in Napa, the Book Mine. Links are in the chat if that helps you at all. But what a pleasure to be with you all tonight, but especially our our authors, and I really imagine both movies on the screen. That would be, both of them are very cinematic and have interesting characters all around the protagonist, which would make it a fascinating story to tell on the screen. So good luck to you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Wonderful having you guys. Take care.
We
Good
really
night,
appreciate
everyone.
Napa Book Mine, Elena, and you and the full team there. Really
Ah,
appreciate it.
thank you. I will tell everyone. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Let's see.